Hey, what's going on, folks? What's up, Lon? Hope everyone's doing good. Thanks for joining me. Let me know if there's any audio issues or anything like that. I was adjusting some of my equipment. So I want to make sure everything's firing on all cylinders, as they say. But so drop me a comment in the chat if there are any issues whatsoever. But once again, it's been a while since I've joined up with y'all on a live, so I appreciate you guys coming and checking me out and listening to me. In today's conversation, as always, we don't shy away from controversial issues. That's something we just don't do. Sadly, we live in a time where there are a lot of media lies or media distortions, half-truths, whatever you want to call them. It's pretty prevalent nowadays. And we constantly have to fight this issue. Recently, I believe just over this last week, over the last few days, the Biden administration sent some people down to Chicago to address the issues of the ever-increasing crime that has been going on, not only in that city, but all over the country. Unless you're living under a rock, you know that crime has spiked dramatically over the last year, in particularly in light of the George Floyd, BLM, Antifa riots. And I won't call them protests because there were riots and there were in it, which resulted in billions of dollars worth of damage, dozens of lost lives. So I won't be gracious to say that it was anything other than riots, mass carnage, destruction. But anyway, the Biden administration sent some people to Chicago to discuss some of the issues in relation to the increase in crime. And I get Google alerts in my email on a daily basis. And basically those Google alerts are a variety of different topics that help me come up with content so I can serve y'all better. And one of those topics that I get is mass shootings or are mass shootings. And I just noticed the inordinate number of emails that I've received over the last few weeks talking about mass shootings. And I was even shocked that many of these news outlets were even using that term, to be honest with you. I was pretty shocked by that. And they're being correct when they call it. So I just started noticing how crazy things have gotten in this area. And especially in cities like Chicago, Houston, Philadelphia, LA, Atlanta. So I just decided, hey, let's get together and let's have a conversation about this. Let's talk about these issues. So I'm going to share some content with y'all, as always. And feel free to comment down below in the chat or in the comment section and share your thoughts in this area. And Chicago is probably, as far as what pops in our head first, Chicago is probably the one that pops in our head first. So there is a video that I want to share with y'all. And I think some of this information might be a little shocking to y'all. But let me know what you think. Once again, let me know if there are any audio issues whatsoever. But I think we should be good to go. Once again, feel free to use the comment section, and we'll jump right in now.
Chicago's seen 3 mass shootings in the past day, but this map shows all of the mass shootings this year, 35 of them. The red dots you see indicate someone died.
Okay, I think that's worth rewinding. This is I think this report came out on the 22nd. On the 22nd alone in Chicago, there were 3 mass shootings. And the general definition that you get is that a mass shooting is when 4 or more people are shot. Now, there are a lot of different ways. Depending on which agency you speak to, whether it's a local police department or whether it's a federal agency like the FBI, some of the content, some of the information that you'll get will it'll change around. But in general, the one that I typically try to go with is 4 or more shootings, 4 or more people who were shot. It doesn't necessarily mean that anyone was killed, but 4 or more people that were shot in one incident. So in the last day, on the day that this was reported, which I believe, as I said, was July 22nd, there were 3 mass shootings in Chicago alone. From January 1st till July 22nd, in Chicago alone, there were 35 mass shootings. 35. That's utterly insane. I don't think it's too shocking for anyone who's been keeping tabs of what's been going on in Chicago, but that's where we are. And it isn't just something that's isolated to the city of Chicago. This is happening all over the country. But let's let the video proceed.
CBS 2's Stephen Graves joins us now live. Stephen, a 15-year-old boy among those killed last night.
Brad, that's right. And talking to his family members, he had a nickname. He was the oldest of his siblings. And talking to his family and family of other victims, you learn the effects of one mass shooting, let alone 2 in one neighborhood, really run deep.
Wow.
Mass shootings in a matter of minutes, causing agony for those who saw loved ones lying on the ground, bleeding.
We losing our babies. These are babies.
Janice Warren's 16-year-old nephew, now on a ventilator, one of a half a dozen teenagers shot in North Lawndale Wednesday evening.
This is
a half a dozen teenagers shot in that one neighborhood in one evening. I don't know how many survived, how many didn't. And unfortunately, for the most part, you have to go to local news to get this type of information. This rarely ever, as far as the details of it, rarely ever gets on the mainstream media outlets, your ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN. Of course, you won't hear about this kind of information, not to this level, on these major news outlets. I'm sure you can trust me. We'll get into why. I'm sure most of y'all listening already have an idea as to why it is that this information is often hidden. But it's the unfortunate state of affairs. And for an organization like BLM, because I know for a fact that there are people out there who are protesting, who are crying out for change in these communities, that there are churches and pastors, community groups who are out there trying to do their part. Sadly, I think at times some of their focus may be wrong, because in many occasions their focus is primarily on guns. But the problem is way deeper than that. But we'll get into that shortly.
kids that grew up under my kids. This is what's happening. I don't understand. This is not life. This is not a norm.
A chalk hopscotch board is still on the sidewalk in front of homes near Douglas Park, where 5 people were hit here. Bobby Child's 15-year-old nephew, Demarion Benson, died in the same shooting. His mom's oldest son.
She's taking it very hard. Very, very, very hard. Little kids, they're not learning, they're not growing up, they're not getting old.
Police say 5 more people were shot blocks from where Demarion was killed some minutes later. Officers believe a 14-year-old getting into a car with his father was hit on accident. And hours later in Lincoln Park, officers say gunmen targeted people in a party bus. 8 victims include a security guard and bus worker. A bystander was also hit. Detectives now investigating a possible link between these mass shootings in North Lawndale, where 2 played out with those young people.
Even the young men who are doing the shooting, they're close friends of the guys that's laying on the ground.
Loved ones are looking for solutions to curb violence.
Oftentimes in situations like that, there's retaliation that takes place. Someone shoots someone's homeboy, someone's friend, a fellow gang member. The police come, they are seeking to do their investigation. Obviously, no one is willing to give any information. No one's willing to say what they saw. for many reasons. One of those is out of fear, because they understand that there will be repercussions if it is found out that you quote unquote snitched, that you told the police what you knew. And the other side of that is that a lot of times people want to take justice into their own hands, and they want to handle it. So what you get is a never-ending cycle of violence that perpetuates, that travels through these communities, and things, unless there is a dramatic cultural transformation, and at the same time the police are allowed to do their job, you'll see this just get worse and worse, sadly.
It takes a village to raise a child, right? And so one of my things is putting the village together and appealing to our children. And our children need to see us stand as one.
He stated a popular term that it takes a village to raise a child. Now, there may be, if you're talking about like a community and things like that, I get it. But I think oftentimes there's too much of an emphasis on that in our modern society, at the expense of the family, at the expense of a solid mother and father in the home, raising their kids up in a just manner or righteous manner, and especially for me as a Christian man, in a way that honors God. You will see a continual cycle. Like I said, until we get back to those principles, those basic principles, man, these issues will only get worse. And instead of a reliance on the community or on the government, if that's what he may be talking about, or I'm not 100% sure, there will always be these issues. And man, it's just sad where we are as a nation right now.
Again, it's unclear if those mass shootings, especially in the North Lawndale area, are connected. No word of any arrests. Brad?
Stephen, are police saying whether these were targeted shootings?
I'm pretty sure that some of them were.
Well, Brad, police are giving the impression that each of these shootings had a targeted element. But like we said, you know, there are people who were just shot by being in the area here. So right now, again, it's unclear if these shooters were aiming for maybe one person or multiple people, but either way, it does up these shootings to that mass shooting classification. Brad?
Yeah. Okay, so a gray area there. Stephen, our thanks tonight. Chicago Police Superintendent Brown compared the recent spike in violence to what Chicago saw in the 80s and 90s, saying we're in a battle for the heart and soul of these communities.
These offenders don't stop until officers are present, because they fuel the street justice with retaliation after retaliation after retaliation. And our forward presence tonight, tomorrow night, the weekend, is critical to continuing to pursue justice for the victims.
Man, I think he nailed it right there. I think he nailed it when he referenced the necessity for law enforcement to be able to do their job.
I'm Bill Hemmer. This is Hemmertown.
Stop that real quick. I think he nailed it when he spoke about the necessity for law enforcement to be able to do their job. Because right now, let me stop this here. All right. Because as long as law enforcement, as long as their hands are tied, this won't get any better. And sadly, the time we're living in right now, what is it? The time we're living in is anti-police. It's all this talk about defunding the police, abolishing the police, you name it. That's the rhetoric that's going on. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people are learning the lesson. Well, some people, I should say. I can't say a lot. Some communities, some cities are learning the lesson that abolishing, defunding the police is a stupid idea. But many aren't. There's still many activists out there. Probably most of them who don't live in these communities that are ravaged by crime, who are still going out there and talking all this nonsense about defunding and abolishing the police. And the unfortunate victims, the ones who actually have to live there, they're the ones who have to put up with these idiotic policies. So you have mayors like, and I don't just want to pick on Chicago, but like Lori Lightfoot, who was one of the ones who is still pushing bills to reimagine, quote unquote, reimagine law enforcement, reimagine policing. I mean, it's just nuts. I mean, it truly is insane. And the sad part about it, many of these people will never have to face the consequences for their radical, insane ideas. They'll never have to face the consequences for it. And most likely they'll be reelected and continue on with their foolishness, because sadly some folks just don't learn. But one thing I want to say is that there are many people out there. I'm typing in something, y'all, so bear with me. There are many people out there who are willing to speak up. There are more and more people who are willing to speak up about what's going on and call out this foolishness that's spreading. There are more and more people who are speaking up. Let me share with you another video as we go on. There was a Washington, D.C. police chief who was speaking on the uptick in crime. And I've been wanting to watch this video, but I haven't had a chance to watch the whole thing. So this will be the first time I'll be watching it with y'all. And we'll see what this brother had to say, because I've really been itching to hear what he had to say, because this has been all over the place.
You may have just been out.
It's been shared all over, but I wanted to hear it myself. So let me make this nice and big so we can all hear what he had to say, because I know there's been some controversy there for some reason. At least I know that much. For some reason, some of the things that he said was considered to be controversial. So let's check out together. And then I'm going to share the rest of my content, the things I want to talk about.
Police, the Metropolitan Police Department. And unfortunately, I'm out here under the circumstance, but I think it's important that we all stand out here collectively, and we're all here together for a number of different reasons. Excuse me, let me take these off, the lens is transition. But what happened out here last night, and I was out here last night, some of you live here, some of you may have just been out here having dinner or whatever, but that was unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
I think there was another large-scale shooting that took place just a few days ago in D.C., and he's talking about it.
In any community, the reality is we have situations that happen like this in our city, all across our city, and it's been happening for a long time. Last year, we had over 922 people shot in our city. Last year. 198 people murdered in our city last year.
Did y'all hear those numbers? This is D.C. alone. Let me back that up. Let me back that up just a few seconds.
Last year. 190 happened like this in our city, all across our city, and it's been happening for a long time. Last year, we had over 922 people shot in our city. Last year. 198 people murdered in our city last year.
Wow.
This should be shocking to the conscience of every person in our city. I don't care where you live. It's got the attention that it's got now because it's happened where it happened.
Good point he made. Why are people talking about it? Because of who you got in office. And it happened, if I'm not mistaken, it happened close to that area. Now people are willing to talk about it.
Because we had an incident at the National Stadium. But this issue that's crossing our city, there are too many guns in our city, in Washington, D.C. Last night, before that shooting happened, our officers assigned here in the 3rd District, they recovered a firearm off an individual down here at 11th and S in Vermont.
I would argue that there are too many illegal guns because there are too many criminals who are in possession of these guns. That's the problem. I think they need to clarify that as they go along.
Right before that, a firearm right up here, 14th and Irving Street. After the sounds of gunshots, right up there. When this shooting happened, officers, within 5 seconds of the shooting where it happened, That's unacceptable. It speaks to the brazenness of the criminals that are in these communities that we're dealing with. Some of them are our neighbors, some are, and we have to really figure out what do we want to do as a city in terms of how we respond to this. We can take the political route and talk, all of this fluffy stuff, but I'm gonna give it to you straight where the issues are. And where the issues are, the ecosystem, the justice system that we have right now, it is not functioning the way that it should. The courts are not open. That is a fact. Barely open. So cases from last year, from 2020 that happened during COVID of violent criminals that have not been disposed of, what do you think those individuals are?
That's nuts right there. This whole COVID thing, I'm telling you, people have used this. Now, I have my personal opinions on it, and some of y'all already know where I stand on that issue. But this whole COVID thing was used as a means to not only change who was elected or who got into office, I'll say, and also it was used as a means to radically transform our nation. Because look at the criminal justice system in and of itself. He's talking about cases from last year that haven't been tried. From last year. And like he said, where are these people at? They ain't sitting in jail. They cut them loose because they're worried about COVID. In the meantime, across the country, there were many law-abiding citizens who simply wanted to open up their businesses, who simply wanted to go to work, who were unable to, and who had that right taken away from them, and they were put in jail. Insanity, y'all. Straight up.
Anybody want to take a guess? They're in community. They're in community, and their cases have not been disposed of. We have to look at, are the things happening that needs to happen when we do place individuals under arrest? The guy for carrying the gun there, the guy for carrying the gun there. What happens with that case when it goes through the system? What's the outcome? What is the expected outcome? What does the community expect when a person gets caught with a firearm? What do we expect? Do we expect to see them in the neighborhood in 3 weeks? And if we do, are we saying that that's acceptable?
Well, to many people, it is acceptable. Unfortunately, there are many people out there who are totally okay with that. And that's just nuts to me. They're totally okay with that. Because once again, they think the criminal justice system is racist.
Because most of the communities that I've talked to have no clue what happens with these cases. They don't. But I'm going to tell you the truth. The real issue is we have a vicious cycle of bad actors who do things, no accountability, and they end up back in community.
Boom. Spot on. No accountability. They end up back in the system because the criminal justice system is broken. I'm not talking about the old school way of doing things, 3 strikes you're out. I'm not saying that was necessarily perfect, but the way this radical progressive shift to this no bail and releasing violent criminal offenders for various reasons, COVID and different reasons, is nuts. And until the citizens they voice their opinion, they say they ain't going to take it anymore, that this is unacceptable, and then we start speaking and acting with our vote and putting the right people in office, then we will continue to deal with this issue, and it will not get any better.
And the police officers, and I guarantee you, when we lock up whoever did this, they will be no stranger to us. I promise you that. So I want us to make sure that we are reclaiming this community. And my hope is that as we do this, that this reverberates through our city, that this is what the response should look like. It should look like this, right? Because there are a lot of corners that I go to after a murder has occurred, and it's just me. It's just the officers. Who are the people that are closest to the pain? Right? That's when we get folks' attention, right? When you're closest to the pain, when you hear the gunshots in your community, that begs a different reaction versus it being someplace else and you just kind of happen to catch it on the news.
Hey, y'all, drop some comments down in the chat and in the comment section. What do you think? Do you think he's on point, or do you think he's misguided? Let me know what y'all think.
This was real for some people, but it's been happening in communities all across our city. And I'm saying to you, enough is enough. I've been a police officer in this city for over 30 years. I've been born and raised right here in this city. Started my patrol career right here in this district. In the way that we're going and the things that we're trying to do, we want to help people. Yes, we should. But you cannot coddle violent criminals.
Tell it, brother.
You cannot. You cannot treat violent criminals who are out here making communities unsafe for you, for your loved ones, for me, for my loved ones. They might not want a job.
Man, we need an organ over here because this brother is preaching. He is preaching over here. I'm loving what he has to say. And he is nailing it. But this radical left has convinced people that the ultimate bad guys are the cops. The ultimate bad guys is law enforcement. So, and that black people, because we're talking about Chicago and DC, and we know, let's call it what it is, the vast majority of these offenders are black. But this movement nowadays wants to make black folks the victim all the time. Almost completely divorce us of any personal responsibility whatsoever. And it's all about pointing the finger, placing blame somewhere else. If we continue to do that, once again, all we do is coddle evil. That's all we do. But man, my brother's dropping that truth. He is dropping some serious truth. I see you, Lon. Lon said he's on point. Yes, he is, no doubt. And May said, loving every word he said. That's it. But the question to ask is, who's listening? In that community, in these communities, who's listening to what he has to say and is willing to do something about it, to do something radically different, to make some changes? I guess only time will tell.
They might not. They might not need services. What they may require is to be off of our streets because they're making it unsafe for us.
Let me go back on that. I got to go back. He said they may not want a job.
For your loved ones, for me, for my
I got to hear that again.
They might not want a job. They might not. They might not need services. What they may require is to be off of our streets because they're making it unsafe for us.
I've literally had people say to me, look me dead in my face when I worked the prison, the jail, I was on the patrolling the streets. I've had grown men look me dead in my face and say, man, I ain't never working for no white man. I ain't never working for no white man. What do you do with a guy like that? You give him some services? You get him some counseling? Now, I'm not saying that those things are completely ineffective, but for some people, putting them back in the system as in the manner of, well, he's just in need or he just needs an education. That ain't the reality. That's just not how things are. Some people just want to do bad. We have to understand that. We have to call it for what it is.
And if that's what it requires, then that's what it requires. And we have to own that.
No doubt.
We have to own it, because if not, we see more of this. We see more of this in our communities. And then what happens? When someone's shot, people are outraged by it. I'm outraged every time. Of those 922, a lot of those 198 that died of that, I stood over many of those. Many of them. Watching families suffer when they don't have to, because we're putting violent criminals or allowing them to be back out in community. That's unacceptable. So what do we do about it? We have honest conversations with the people, the leadership, be it the police chief, be it council members, be it courts, be it whoever. It's easy. The police department, we're an easy target. You can easily focus on the police department, about what the police department did, didn't do. That's easy. I'm challenging you to look at the entire system. The laws that are in place for people who carry guns in our community, who do things to people in community, violent acts, are those things acceptable? Are they acceptable? And if whatever you say is acceptable, it's my responsibility to enforce that. That's my job, to respond to those things that the community say, this is what the standard is.
Yeah, acceptable or not acceptable. If you say that, and I know this may be controversial for some, but I'm not an advocate of just like backing off and just legalizing all drugs, because I know the actual heart of man. And when you give them an inch, we will continue to take a mile, and we will only continue to kill ourselves, kill innocent people, because a lot of times people just don't know how to be careful, taper, or what's the word I'm looking for? Knowing how to just use just a little. It's always the abundance. How many lives are lost? And I'm not saying alcohol should have been illegalized or stayed illegal, but you have to ask the honest question: how many lives have been lost over the years with alcohol? People driving drunk. I'm sure the number's in the millions. So you just want to give people who don't have any, hardly have minimal inhibitions to say, hey, you know what, I need to kind of slow things down here and there. So you're just giving them more means, more avenues to destroy themselves, to destroy other lives. I'm just not a big fan on that personally. Now, I know some people may disagree, but I'm just not the biggest fan. So when you say that, when we start radically changing criminal laws, let me get back on track. When we start radically changing what's a crime and what isn't, because if you listen to people like Abraham X and all these CRT, critical race theory advocates, a lot of things that they talk about is the criminal justice system is inherently racist in and of itself. So what are you going to be confronted with in a lot of occasions? You'll be confronted with people who want to reduce what is considered a crime and what isn't. Now, to what degree? What are they talking about? A lot of times they don't articulate it. Now, many times they'll say the drug issues and stuff like that. And like I said, once again, that could be debated. But some of these people are so extreme with some of their ideas because they think that if you're talking about crime, being tough on crime, that's somehow a racist dog whistle. We're talking utter nonsense that's going on out there. But as long as the community keeps believing this, because sadly, we're living in a time where you don't hear a lot of diversity of ideas and diversity of thought. The left primarily controls the majority of media outlets. If you don't believe me, just think about it. Disney, all the major news networks. If you look at who's behind them, who's running them, and see where their political allegiances lie, where they spend their money when it comes to donations, social media, the major sports industries, the academia, what are you going to see? You will see people who lean primarily, heavily on the left. So they're controlling the conversation every which way. So you're not hearing variety in thought. What are you getting? What is some of the things that you're hearing nowadays? Whether it's a COVID issue, or whether you're talking about the marriage issue, whether you're talking about the life issue, or issues as related to the election last year, you're hearing disinformation or something to be considered hateful, hate speech. So they use those terms to say, okay, your opinion is dangerous and it is not, and from their perspective, and it is not welcomed here. So as a result, you don't hear any or hardly any diversity of thought. I don't know how many times I've had to deal with videos being rejected or being taken down or banned because they thought it was controversial. YouTube, whomever, Facebook. I've had that happen to me on numerous occasions because of the controversial line of topic or discussions I was having. But so as long as people continue to hear only one side or primarily one side, and the other side is deemed racist or bigoted or homophobic or xenophobic or misogynistic, you're not going to hear any diversity of thought. Things will only get worse. And when you got old boy in the White House right now talking about continuing to talk about taking away people's freedoms, y'all that helped put him there where he's at, I hope y'all are ready for what's coming.
If some people knew what the standard is, what the outcome is on the other end of some of these cases, it would blow your mind. Why is it that a guy who murdered somebody is out in community after having been arrested 2 or 3 months late, 2 or 3 months prior, with a firearm? What do we think he was going to do? The recidivism rate for violent offenders is the highest that we've seen anywhere. 87%, I think, in that area for people who carry guns. They use them.
Recidivism is being back in the system continually. You offend one time, you end up offending another time. 87%. So that's almost 100%. That's almost all of them.
I'm mad as hell about this, and I hope y'all are too. I really do. Because I like coming to 14th Street. I like going to Chicken and Whiskey and getting my chicken out of there and my plantain and everything, my rice, my crab rice. I love that. And I don't want to be afraid for my wife to go there because some knucklehead in community decided to pull out a gun and fire it at 8:20 in the evening. That is unacceptable. So what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Do we go back to our regular spaces and, back to saying, okay, yeah, we made plenty of legislation and reform efforts for the police. Look at the entire system, folks. That's all I'm asking you to do. Look at the system.
Because clearly, with the emphasis being on law enforcement, but what are we seeing? An increase in crime. You're tying the hands, you're handcuffing law enforcement, but we continue to see an increase in crime. What that should tell you what the primary problem is. It ain't law enforcement. No, I'm not saying that cops should be able to do whatever they want to do. Of course not. Anyone who's familiar with my channel knows better than that. But like the chief is saying here, we need to do better than just simply looking at cops and trying to say defund, abolish the police. Lon says it's a heart issue, not guns, not drugs. Absolutely. At the core of it all, it's a heart issue. And once we understand the heart of man, and I think that it is clear a solid biblical perspective is the best perspective, best way to look at this, the most reasonable, we understand that, man, people are just going to, apart from Christ, apart from being born again, and even those of us who have been born again, we're still going to wrestle and struggle with issues of sin because we're still in this flesh. So, but when you talk about people who are just out there who just want to live how they want to live and they have no inhibitions whatsoever, we ain't getting, nothing good comes from that. Nothing good at all.
How are we holding people accountable? What does that accountability look like, and is it okay with you? On that note, I want us to walk and talk.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
He should be joining us.
He
right?
should be. He really should be. Yes, ma'am. We sure can.
I love what you're saying.
Yes, ma'am.
But looking at the whole system, so
Yep.
I'm the president of the Local Circle Community Association, and we're not regularly in law enforcement, so we don't know that much about the system.
That's fine.
And our terrific council member has been great about starting to explain it to us. But what's the best way for us to fully understand the system, and what's the best way for us to intervene in a way that's helpful in addressing these issues?
I think the first thing that we need to do, we look at we look at cases, right? And we follow cases through the system. That's important. We understand from council members, we understand from police, we understand from prosecutors, we understand from judges, we understand the different perspectives because everyone has a perspective. And I think as residents begin to kind of understand these things, how the system actually works, I think we will be in a better place as a result of that. And sometimes it's having community forums like this, but perhaps someplace else where you have those representatives there to kind of talk about the different perspectives that are there. For example, let's say you have a robbery, you got a guy charged with robbery, gun, or something like that. I'll just use that as an example. Well, the sentence range for that, let's say it's between 2 years and 15 years. A judge can issue a sentence or a guidance compliant sentence with a person receiving 2 years as a penalty for putting that gun in your face and for robbing you. Well, that person who does that does not necessarily have to do all 2 of those years.
True.
He or she might do a percentage of that time, and then the rest of the time on probation is also considered sentence compliant or guideline compliant. So that person who stuck that gun in your face and robbed you within a certain period of time back out in the community, is that time that we have set, is that acceptable? Because when we start talking about this issue, especially when it comes from me, the issue becomes, you're talking about mass incarceration. I'm not talking about mass incarceration. I'm talking about keeping people safe in community. Why is it that hold on 1 second, sir. I'm gonna come to you in a second. One second, okay?
So Chief, we got the press piece at the end. Let's do the walk here, okay?
Okay. But that's just kind of a little bit of some of the things that happen in that space.
As an excellent point he made, in that a lot of what's considered mass incarceration, or a lot of the emphasis on mass incarceration, is primarily a focus on the suspect, concern for the suspect. In the meantime, you completely ignore the victim. The victims are almost universally ignored in many of all this talk that we're dealing with nowadays, all this defunding the police, mass incarceration, all this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that some of these laws shouldn't change and shouldn't there shouldn't be any reforms whatsoever. But a lot of this is just an emphasis on the offender. It's concerned about the one who broke the law, the one who violated someone else's rights. And in the midst of all this, the victim is almost always forgotten. But let's move on to this last topic here. And this is because we're talking about shootings here. We're talking about shootings. We're talking about mass shootings. And there are so many assumptions that are made. As a matter of fact, those of y'all who are here, who are watching, what are some things that you've heard and you've been led to believe in the area of mass shootings? Like, what are some assumptions? What's the first thing that pops into your head when you think about a mass shooting? I know what goes to my mind, but put some in the comments, put some in the chats. When you hear about the idea of a mass shooting or an active shooter, whatever it may be, what are some of the things that pop in your head right off the bat as I fire up this one video? Because I know how my mind thinks and what I've been led to believe over the years. And I'm pretty sure that I'm not alone in this. I'm pretty sure that I'm not alone. But there are many things. Good point. Hate, love, nothing. Socially isolated or disturbed kid. Also white, to be honest. No, that's it. That's what you're led to believe, oftentimes in the mainstream media. That the predominant offender is some jacked up white kid who got bullied growing up or teased or couldn't get a girlfriend, social outcast, totally. Or a white supremacist. But and that's what you get from your mainstream media outlets. But there's information, there's other information. What else you got up here? Hate, Love, Nothing said, although that doesn't have much to do with it. There's always a lot more going on. Or oftentimes, I should say. Not always. But oftentimes, there's a lot more going on than just those issues. So as always, not trying to be controversial, but I know I'm going to be controversial discussing these issues. But I found this interesting article from on Front Page Magazine. I think this is a website primarily brought about by David Horowitz, conservative author. Dude used to be a radical leftist, but now he's a conservative author. This is from 2019. But according to the information here, I'm going to read some of the article, not the entire thing, or maybe I will. 51% of mass shooters in 2019 were black. 51%. Whoa. Now, the first thing that I would ask is, okay, how did they come up with this number? And how did they classify a mass shooter? So let's jump into it. No, mass shootings are not a white man's problem. Around the same time that the media was focused on the mass shooting in El Paso and Dayton, 60 people were shot in Chicago over the weekend. This is from, I said 2019, August of 2019. That first paragraph or first couple of sentences right there is shocking. He said around the same time the media was focused on mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton, 60 people were shot in Chicago over the weekend. 24 of those people were shot in 4 hours. My goodness. I mean, that's just insane. Baltimore reached its 200th murder victim of the year during its ceasefire weekend. 4 people were killed in 4 days in Kansas City. 6 men were shot in Philly during the filming of a rap video. That's not shocking. I mean, I don't even want to get into the impact of music on our culture. Even in Toronto, 15 people were wounded in shootings over the weekend. Over 350 people have been shot this year in the Canadian city, which has gun control, no NRA, and none of the usual excuses. I wonder what they have to say. I know they're really radical up there in Canada. Like all the things that we're dealing with in America with this radical progressive push, I know they're a few years ahead of us, sadly. But these numbers are stunning. This tide of violence has received less media coverage because it challenges the false claim that, as a CNN op-ed once put it, mass shootings are a quote-unquote white man's problem. I think that was Don Lemon. I know he had said something like that on air, but I'm not sure if this op-ed, what he's talking about. Quote, I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country. Now, without even reading the rest of this article, I know for a fact that that is patently false. All the studies and research I've done with the FBI Uniform Crime Report and even with the Washington Post police shootings database, that number, this statement she just made is a out and out lie. And I wonder how many fact checkers were quick to jump on her and prove her wrong. I would guess that there weren't that many. But Ilhan Omar claimed this on Al Jazeera. We have to stop demonizing people and realizing the bigger terror threat in this country is white men. The biggest terror threat. Don Lemon had previously claimed on CNN. Quote, white men have committed more mass shootings than any other group, Newsweek had argued. The perception that mass shootings are a white man's problem, quote unquote, lingers around the country because white mass shooters tend to get more publicity. And I really want people to get that point. If anyone has or hasn't seen my presentation on police brutality, separating fact from fiction, once again, the title, Police Brutality, Separating Fact from Fiction, go to Code Red Conversations, my YouTube channel. Matter of fact, I'll drop the link on my Facebook page and on my YouTube in the comment section on YouTube for this video, excuse me. So y'all can check that out. But I go into pretty good detail as to how the media has twisted information over the years based on a variety of reasons. But they can get people to basically believe whatever they want. And when you hear something repeated over and over again, regardless of whether it's factual or not, people have a tendency to start believing it. And the twisted young male who goes on a public shooting spree fits a certain kind of media narrative. But when we actually study mass shootings that took place in 2019, it's clear that Patrick Crusius and Connor Betts are not the norm, but the aberration. Mass shooters have no particular ideology. Crusius and Betts were opposite ideologically, though both care deeply about the environment. Nor are mass shooters a white problem or a black problem. Over the same bloody weekend, William Patrick Williams, who was African American, appeared in court after being arrested by the FBI for planning to shoot up a Texas hotel with an AK-47. I'm going to drop the link in the comment sections also of this article because it has a lot of links in it so that you can check out for yourself. Looking at the data from the mass shooting tracker. Oh, by the way, I was having some trouble pulling that up. The mass shooting tracker. I had a lot of issue pulling that up on Google. So you may have to go to maybe just DuckDuckGo or wherever to be able to pull that up. I don't know if they were being messy or what, but just giving you a heads up. Maybe you won't have the same issue. Okay, what was that? Okay, looking at the data from Mass Shooting Tracker, widely utilized by the media as of this writing, of the 72 perpetrators in shootings that killed or wounded four or more people, so they're using the same type of information, the same standard, whose race is known, 21 were white, 37 were black, 8 were Latino, and 6 were members of other groups. I'll read that one more time. In the shootings that killed or wounded 4 or more people whose race is known, 21 were white, 37 were black, 8 were Latino, and 6 were members of other groups. 51% of mass shooters in 2019 were black. 29% were white. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the numbers are for this year or for last year, but if you go to massshooters.com or mass shooters, what's the website? If you go to massshootingtrackers.site, if I'm not mistaken, mass shooting trackers, they have posted in there that there's somewhere that there've been over 456. There are about 456 mass shootings this year alone. 456. And I was just skimming through it, and man, these some of these, it's pretty nuts. Pretty nuts out there. 3 mass shooters were Asian, 2 were American Indian, and 1 Arabic. Again, this is 2019. These numbers are, if anything, vastly understated. As many as half of the mass shootings that took place in 2019 thus far remain unsolved. And that's a big clue right there. But they often took place where, does he say? In black areas and claimed black victims. Chicago, Philly, Atlanta, LA, Houston, other places, Dallas, Baltimore, if I didn't already say that. Unknown offender, because snitches get stitches, quote unquote. White people make up 61% of the country's population, followed by Hispanics at 17.8% and African Americans at 12.7%. In that context, white people are actually dramatically underrepresented among mass shooters, as are Latinos, while African Americans are highly overrepresented. But that may be because Latino gangs like MS-13 are less likely to use handguns in public shootouts, and white organized crime groups like the Mafia no longer carry out attacks like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Cultural shifts. Back in the day, I'm sure these numbers were dramatically, back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, 70s, early 70s, I'm sure these numbers were dramatically different as far as who were the primary offender. But nowadays, things are different. Much of this country's gun violence is really gang violence. Excellent point, I think. And shooting your enemies is a tactic. White organized crime groups make their victims disappear. MS-13 victims are beheaded and buried in parks. Black gang members open fire in each other's in each. Let me read that again. Black gang members open fire on each other in major cities. The perpetrators are sometimes never caught. When we distill the problem of mass shootings to its statistical root, it becomes a gang tactic. I'll read one more paragraph. Would the media really like to argue that beheadings are preferable to shootings as a tactic? Were the people buried under Whitey's house better off than gang members shot in a Chicago street corner? Now, I would say that when the shootings take place, that sadly a lot of innocent people get sprayed as a result. And if someone gets beheaded, at least it's more targeted. I'm not saying justifying it. I'm not saying that's a good thing. But it's more targeted and more focused. I'm sure back in the day when the mafia would drive by and they would do a drive-by shooting and gun people down, that there were plenty of innocent victims who got shot, just like there are today. But I really wanted to shed a little light, or a lot more light, on the issue of where we are now, today, when it comes to the issue of crime, and particularly mass shootings in our nation. I can only imagine what the homicide rate is going to be from last year as opposed to 2019. And then on top of that, 2021, I can only imagine how those numbers have dramatically increased over the last few years. As was stated throughout the course of this video, I'm pretty sure that we are close to, if not right at, the numbers in the early 90s when crime was up all over the place. The late 80s, early 90s. But once again, I'd love to know what y'all think about all the stuff that we discussed, we talked about in this video. Put some comments in the chat. Comment down below. I'd love to know what y'all think. Thanks for watching. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you head on over to Code Red Conversations on my YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, share these videos. I know it might be a little tough at times to share some of these topics because they're a bit controversial, but let me do the talking for y'all. I don't mind the pushback. I actually enjoy it, especially if someone actually has a rational point of view. I think my man over here was shocked. Yeah, it was pretty surprising. A lot of this, when I first heard it, I was stunned myself. I was totally stunned myself. Because once again, you hear things continually said one way. You kind of get to the point where you start assuming that it to be factual. But if I haven't learned anything over the last 10 years or so, in particularly since the Lord saved me, the last 10 years, and even more in the last year, that, man, what the media says, more than ever, I already have my concerns and a lack of trust for the media, because I know they have no problem perpetuating, when we're talking about the mainstream media, I know they have no problem perpetuating lies if it'll fit their agenda. None whatsoever. But I'm even more skeptical. So when I hear something reported repeatedly or stated repeatedly, the first thing I think about is, okay, what's going on there? Is there an agenda behind all this? And then I start doing more and more investigating, because I just want to know the facts. I just want to know truth. And I would encourage y'all to do the same thing. Be more open. Be more willing to do the hard work, to pick up a book and read some alternate news sources. Who do I listen to when it comes to your general news? NTD News, N as in Nora, T as in Tom, D as in David. NTD News. I also watch and read the Epoch Times, EPOCH Times. Check out Breitbart with some of their headlines. And a lot of independent news journalists out there, like Tim Pool. I check out Andy No, a lot of people like that. And then I just try to read from various other sources. I just keep reading the Daily Wire. But the first three I mentioned are the main ones that I go to get news. I'm just very leery personally. I'm very leery of what I'm being told. I don't assume that what I'm being told is necessarily factual. Once again, y'all, I appreciate y'all joining me today. And once again, comment down below. Tell me what your thoughts are on the issues of from the mass shootings to the radical spike in crime and the mainstream media. I'd love to know what y'all think. Thanks for watching. As always, in the meantime, stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join the conversation.